Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm sorry, it's another evening one. For those of you who have been waiting today, I do apologise. It's been very difficult to get up today for various reasons, and I've just snuck up just now to read these two chapters, and I've kind of snuck away from the children, although they might come up because I'll be wondering where I am, especially if I start doing my scary warden voice. You'll probably remember what's happened if you've been following. But if anyone does happen to have joined us right now, then a whole lot of stuff has happened. But basically, Alex and Z and Simon have made it up from the tunnels beneath general population for the Warden's kind of experimental laboratories where the Weezers and the Black Suits live and are made. And they have taken control of general population, and they've trapped the Warden beneath the ground. And they've killed pretty much every black suit that's come to get them. And the Warden is running out of ideas. And I think he's really starting to panic that he may have lost control of the prison for good. However, Alex and the others aren't out of the woods, out of danger yet, because they're still trapped in general population and they've got no way of controlling the elevator. The only thing they can think of doing is trying to crack the gate of the elevator doors, and these are armoured doors, and the only thing they have really are pickaxes. So, and Alex is also running out of nectar, the stuff that is fueling his new body and his powers. It's starting to go. So we join them, but at least everyone in the prison is on board now. Nobody else wants to really kill them, although some people probably do want to kill them, but nobody is going to kill them because the skulls are on their side now. Okay, cracking the gate. Bodhi had been right. 5 minutes after the Warden vanished from the screen, there was still no sign of him, no sign of the retribution he had promised. 10 minutes after that, and the inmates of Furnace were starting to feel invincible. Running around the prison looking for the hidden security cameras and shouting insults at the Warden. Some were even flashing their backsides at him, or relieving themselves over the black eyes in the rock. And I couldn't help but laugh as I pictured him sitting in his quarters, effectively getting pissed on. And that was the least of his problems, from the sounds of it. Just as we were starting up on the elevator doors again, one of Bodhi's lieutenants came rushing from the tunnel, shotgun hanging by his side. "Yo, boss! Better take a listen to this." He coughed, gesturing back with his weapon the way he'd come. Z and I followed Bodhi down the tunnel back to the ruined control room, the crunch of loose rock beneath our feet masking the noises from below until we were right up against the gates of the lower elevator. "Wait for it," said the skull who'd come to fetch us. "Ain't loud, but..." We heard it. A muffled pop from somewhere deep under our feet. It was followed by several more, like a kid playing with bubble wrap. I thought I could hear something else too, a howling scream that sent shivers up my spine, even though I didn't know if it had been real or in my imagination. "What do you think's going on?" asked Z, leaning on the skeletal remains of the elevator car. "Sounds like gunfire." "What are they shooting at down there?" Bodhi said. "Each other?" "Gary," I replied. "Say what?" said one of the skulls. "You mean Gary Owens?" "I thought he was dead," said Bodhi, when I nodded. "He was taken, yeah," I explained. "Taken the same time Z and I were, out of the river. Warden was turning him into a black suit, only he became something else. Something worse." I tried to remember what the Warden had called him. A berserker? "Worse than what he was up here," said Bodhi with a whistle. "That's real bad." I waited as a fresh round of gunfire exploded from below before telling them about Gary, the monster he'd become, and how I'd let him out of his cage to fight the suits. I'd seen him take down 6 or more armed guards without stopping for breath. If he was still rampaging through the tunnels, then the Warden would have his work cut out for a while. And if Gary was loose, there was nothing stopping him from freeing the other prisoners and releasing the rats. Maybe the air of revolution had somehow found its way down to the prison underbelly. Even the rats weren't so far gone that they wouldn't recognise the smell of freedom if they caught it. "Think he knows enough to find his way back here?" asked Bodhi. I felt my blood run cold as I pictured Gary clawing his way up the elevator shaft, bursting into the prison. There'd be nothing to stop his killing spree. "Let's hope not," was all I could think of to say. "And if he does," Z added, "let's make sure we're well and truly vamoosed." By the time we were back out in the yard, Simon and a large 59er were pounding at the main elevator doors again, the sound of their pickaxes striking the steel making my ears hurt. Their aim was a lot better than mine had been, a cluster of pockmarks centred around the faint line where the doors met each other. As I got closer, I could see that the metal was starting to weaken, each relentless strike parting it a little more. "Good work," said Bodie. "Bit more and we might be able to wedge something between the doors, force them open." "A bit more and you're going to have to drag my corpse out of the way first," said Simon, panting hard. He held his pickaxe out to me. "Here, your turn." "Yes, sir, Mr. Rojo Flores," I replied, snatching the tool from him and ignoring his raised middle finger. What does that name mean, anyway? "Literally, it means killer of those who jerk my chain," he said, "so watch it." "Means red flowers," corrected Z, making us all laugh, including Simon. He muttered playfully as he walked out of my way, leaving me a clear shot at the doors. Bodie took the other pickaxe from the skull, and I waited for him to strike before bracing myself, squaring my shoulders, relaxing my muscles. This time I didn't put all my strength into it, focusing on my aim instead. My pickaxe made a contact a couple of centimetres or so from the centre, the impact still jarring, but not enough to dislocate my arms. While Bodie struck again, I looked out across the prison, watching the inmates mill around restlessly. Most were looking at us, others raiding the various rooms and cells in search of anything useful. At least they weren't still all trying to kill each other. "In your own time, Alex," said Bodie. "It's not like we've got a deadline here or anything." I mumbled an apology, swinging my pickaxe again and grinning with satisfaction as it struck the line between the doors, opening up a lip in the metal. Bodie aimed for the same place and hit the bullseye with a whoop of triumph. I missed with my next two shots, but he was bang on every time, the hole reluctantly parting a little more with each jarring impact. It was my next strike that finally did it, however. With a grunt of effort, I rammed the head of my pickaxe square into the gap that was forming, the point sliding between the doors with so much force that it was jammed tight. I tried to pull it out, but Bodie stopped me. "Leave it," he said, pushing me away and grabbing the handle. Instead of wrenching the pick free, he braced a foot on the door and twisted, using it like a lever. There was an angry protest of gears from behind the wall as the doors began to part, sliding open a centimetre or two. Bodie grimaced, hissing out an order between his teeth as he struggled to hold the doors open. Sorry. "Get a prop in there." Z was the first to react, grabbing another of the pickaxes and wedging the handle in the crack at the bottom of the elevator. Bodie let go, panting hard but smiling at the shadowed slit that now separated the two doors. There was a round of cheers and high fives from the cluster of kids by the elevator. "Who wants to do the honours?" he said, stepping back. I walked to the doors, putting my face up to the crack between them and trying to focus on the muted light inside. It was impossible to make out any details through such a small space, but I was pretty sure that what I was looking at was the smooth metal walls of the elevator cab, rather than the rough hewn rock of the shaft. "It's down," I said, enlisting another round of vocal celebrations. "It's right there." Then let's not keep it waiting any longer," replied Simon, selecting a pickaxe and taking up his post by the doors. He rammed the blade into the gap and levered it in the same way Bodie had, forcing the elevator open another centimetre or two. This time Z was ready, holding a section of steel frame from one of the bunks that had been thrown onto the yard. As soon as the doors had parted far enough, he slotted the bar between them, letting Simon pull out his pickaxe. The mechanism protested with a squeal, but the wedge held. "Little more and we should be able to fit through," said Bodie, nervously sliding his hand between the elevator doors as if making sure the gap wasn't an illusion. It was as he was pulling it out again that we heard it, a noise like a distant jet engine taken off, echoing down the elevator shaft. We all took a nervous step back. "They must be pulling it back up," somebody said, but I shook my head. "No, that isn't the elevator," Z answered before I could open my mouth. "It's something else." The sound came again, this time reminding me of the growls and screams we'd heard rising up from the levels below. Maybe the shafts were linked somehow by air vents or something. Maybe it was the same noise we were hearing now, only This was louder, a roar that reminded me of dragons, and it was definitely coming from above us. "Forget it," said Bodhi. "Don't mean nothing. Black suits up top are probably trying to scare us, you know?" Z moved to the crack between the doors, peering into the bruised light beyond. "Has anyone not wondered why the elevator hasn't been pulled up?" he asked. "Surely that's the first thing the warden would do, stop us getting inside and boosting a lift." "Maybe he can't operate it from down there," I suggested. "We did blow up his control room." "Say what?" exclaimed Bodhi. "Even if the warden can't," Z went on, ignoring him, "whoever's posted in the Black Fort must still be able to work it. And I don't get why they haven't lifted it out of our reach." "Like I said," Bodhi interrupted, nudging Z out of the way and lifting his pickaxe again. "Forget it. Fact is, the elevator's down here, and the longer we spend talking crap, the more likely it is they will pull it up." He slotted the pickaxe through the doors and leaned against the handle, Simon adding his bulk to the effort. Their groans of exertion almost matched the grinding squeal of metal in volume as the gap widened another fraction. Somebody ran forward with a toilet seat, squeezing it between the doors and stamping on it until it was firmly wedged in place. When we all stood back, we could see the interior of the elevator, our ticket out of here, bathed in tremulous yellow light. "Grab that side," barked Bodhi, taking hold of one elevator door and pulling hard, throwing all his body weight into it to try to jerk the metal open. Simon joined him, the two boys like a tug-of-war team in the last throes of battle. I moved to the other side, hooking my fingers around the cold metal. The big 59er ducked under me, and together we gave it everything we had. It was like trying to drag a truck up a hill, the stubborn doors refusing to budge more than a millimetre at a time. But there isn't much that can stand up to a group of inmates with freedom in their sights, and those millimetres soon started to add up. We pulled with every last ounce of strength we had, not stopping to wipe the sweat from our eyes or to rub the cramps from our backs. When the doors had parted a metre or so, one of the skulls wedged another broken piece of bunk frame between them. He hung from the bar, tugging it down from a diagonal to a horizontal, and in doing so, forcing the doors apart by another few centimetres. "Sorted," he said, turning to Bodhi with his thumb raised. There was a click from inside the cab, then the sound of something turning like an electric drill. Too late, I realised what it was. The machine gun on the ceiling of the elevator spewed out a burst of fire and noise, and I watched the skull evaporate. An invisible stream of bullets punched what was left of his body across the yard, tearing chunks of stone from the floor before thumping him to the bonfire like a giant fist. The blast cut through the metal bar holding the doors open, and with a grating crunch they slid shut. Only the upended toilet seat stopped them from closing completely. And through the sliver, I could see the rotating barrel of the gun spin to a halt, lazy whispers of smoke curling out from the holes. Bodhi was the only one to move. He started off towards the fire, calling the skull's name with such urgent, sobbing cries that I couldn't make out what it had been. He'd only stumbled a few steps before he realised how futile it was, the corpse now long buried in the hungry flames. Instead, he looked down at the scar that had been clawed across the yard, blood pooling in the deepest parts of it, like some nightmare canal. I turned away, frightened that if I watched for much longer, I might go mad. Instead, I looked at Z, slumped against the wall, beside the doors, so grey I thought I could see right through him. He lifted his head, the flames reflected in his liquid eyes like an oil fire on water. He had to spit words through a choked throat. "Now we know why they left the elevator down." Oh, no. Damned. It felt like forever before anyone remembered how to move. The entire prison was a mausoleum, not even a whisper daring to break the silence. Eventually Bodhi looked up from the ruined floor, gazing once at the bonfire, which had become a funeral pyre for his friend, then at us. His face twitched as it tried to find the right expression, morphing through such extremes of grief and fear and rage that it looked like there was something crawling beneath his skin. He lurched towards me, and for a moment I saw murder in his eyes, as though he thought I was responsible for what had happened, or he wanted to take it out on the nearest thing to a black suit he had. To my relief, he barged past us and slammed a fist against the elevator doors, seeming to swallow all his emotions in one stuttered gulp before turning to face the yard. "Now what?" he asked, his voice shaky but his tone firm. That shouldn't have," said Z quietly. The armed response was switched off, and with the control room the way it is, I don't see how they could have turned it back on." "Warden's quarters," I said. "He must have his own command system." "No," Z replied, shaking his head. "If that's the case, then why haven't all the guns been blazing? Doesn't make sense, not unless—" He paused for thought, ignoring the prompts from everyone around him. "The gun in the elevator must operate on a different circuit. It must be programmed to fire automatically if the doors are opened with force." He swore, banging his head against the wall. "You can fix it, right?" asked Bodhi. "Same way you fixed the doors?" "No way," was Z's blunt response. "To do that, I'd either have to get inside the cabin or, more likely, get to the controls at the top of the shaft. Christ, like we honestly thought it would be as simple as breaking through the doors." Bodhi turned to me, everyone in the yard seeming to follow his line of sight until my skin crawled with the force of their expectation. I don't know," I whispered. "The elevator's the only way up. We have to find a way to get in." "Maybe you want to volunteer next time?" he snapped. "We could make a shield or something," said Simon, "out of metal. One of the surfaces from the kitchen, maybe." "You saw the way that gun cut through the bar," Z said, "and through the rock. Must be 50 caliber at least. It will tear any shield to shreds, along with whoever's behind it." Bodhi winced, that flash of anger appearing as a dark shadow behind his eyes. He started to pace, his entire body tensed like a spring. I tried to think of another plan. Anything that would get us out of here. But my mind was locked up tighter than a cell door. There was nothing there but a growing sense of futility. Just to fill the silence, I threw out a few meaningless words. "Maybe it's worth a try. If we can hide behind something until we get inside the elevator, then maybe we can deactivate the gun. I don't know." "And watch someone else die," Bodhi said. "Did you honestly think we'd get out without some sacrifices?" I spat back, my own temper flaring. "You think I haven't lost friends? We all have. We just have to deal with it and move on. We can mourn them when we're out of here." I pointed up, pulling back when Bodhi came at me. He planted his hands on my chest and pushed hard before storming towards the centre of the yard. I watched him go, then turned to the other skulls. "What?" I asked them. They looked nervously at each other before one found the courage to speak. "That was his brother," he said. I felt my heart drop from my chest, sinking all the way to my feet and leaving me hollow inside. Bodhi was standing as close to the flames as he could, and even from this distance I could see his body shaking. I wanted to go to him, to say something to make it better. I'd seen so many people die since coming to Furnace, boys who'd become my brothers, but to lose actual flesh and blood, I couldn't even begin to imagine what that was like. "Leave him to it," said Simon. "Nothing you can do. We just got to figure out a way past that turret." "How?" I asked. "How do we get inside?" He didn't speak. Nobody did. But I had no idea that I was about to find out in one of the worst ways possible. No idea that our answer would come in the shape of the most terrifying nightmare Furnace Penitentiary had ever unleashed upon its inmates. "Any luck?" 10 minutes after Bodhi's brother had died, I was crouched against the wall beside the elevator doors, studying the blueprint of the prison laid out before me as if I didn't know it was useless. The knotted white lines were like clumps of plant roots, and I kept waiting for them to sprout out across the torn paper, a new escape route blossoming from nowhere. But there was just the single stalk of the elevator shaft leading to the surface. Everything else was buried deep beneath the ground, us alongside it. "Alex, any luck?" Simon repeated, leaning over me and perusing the plans himself. I shook my head, turning my bleary eyes out into the yard. The Skulls and the 59ers were holding court close by, talking in hushed tones. I hoped they were coming up with more than I was. A gargling from Z's stomach a few minutes ago had reminded him of his hunger, sending him careening off towards the trough room in search of leftovers. Bodhi hadn't moved from the fire, so motionless now that he looked like a graveyard carving silhouetted against the setting sun. I still say the shield idea is the best we've got, Simon went on, running his large hand over the elevator doors, but careful to stay away from the centre. We could use sheets to bind together 3 or 4 surfaces from the kitchen. That's bound to hold up for the few seconds we need to get inside. The gun rotates, I answered, not really listening to my own words. We can't get past it if it shoots us wherever we stand. Then we blow it up, he persisted, and risk sealing off our only way out. Come on, Simon. All I'm saying is that we'd better think of something fast, he said. I thought he was going to mention the warden in the black suits climbing up from below, but instead he nodded towards the gang members. I glanced up, suddenly nervous at the way they kept peering over at us. They wouldn't, I said. Don't see what choice they have, Simon muttered. I used the wall to lever myself up, walking over to the huddle of whispering kids. They fell silent when they saw me approach, looking at me with a strange mix of anxiety and determination. Thought of a plan? I asked. Yeah, we're putting a little something together, replied one through a sneer. Why don't you and your buddy go and wait by the elevator? We'll be with you in a minute. Won't do you any good, I said, my hackles raised, my arms suddenly tensed by my sides. You think the warden's going to let you go just like that if you kill us? You know what he's like, what he's capable of. He'll skin you alive for what you did to the black suits. Oh, you think sitting down here with our asses in our hands is going to end us any better? Said another of the skulls. They began to fan out, the group opening like a claw ready to snatch me. Ain't no way to the surface, man. Better staying alive in here than dropping dead trying to skip, said a 59er. I ain't no martyr. I lifted my hands, ready for them. This wasn't what I wanted, but I knew I was more than a match for these guys, so long as the rest of the prison didn't decide to join in. The adrenaline began to pump through my veins again, carrying the nectar with it. The darkness inside me seemed to revel in the thought of combat, drawing a crimson veil over my vision and making me clench my fists so hard that I could feel nails piercing my skin. The gang members eyed each other nervously, but they didn't stop advancing. Go get the little one, said the skull who'd spoken first, nodding towards the trough room. This time the wave of nectar that pulsed through my head made me growl, a deep, throbbing roll of thunder that turned the boys to stone. For what must have been a full minute we stood there, deadlocked, tensed, like 2 opposing dams ready to burst. It was only when the fizz of static filled the prison that we stepped off, the skulls backing away as they watched the cracked video monitor above the elevator doors power on. The white furnace logo floated lazily on its bed of black, as if waiting for the entire prison to gather around. Then it parted to reveal a face. At first I didn't recognise him. The warden so pale, so drawn, that it looked like his mask of flesh was slipping away from the bone beneath. His eyes were still black pits that promised an eternity of suffering, but they seemed to flicker from dark to light and back again, as though the power that fueled them was running out. The bruises had spread across his nose and cheeks, and there was a thin trail of black blood winding its way down from one nostril. His tongue flashed across his upper lip, as if tasting the dark fluid, and when he smiled it was smeared across his teeth. "We'll kill him!" yelled the skull before the warden had a chance to speak. The camera beneath the screen was still smoking, but he must have had others trained on us because the words made him laugh, a dry hiss that sounded more like a dying breath. Somewhere behind him, broadcast into the yard through hidden speakers, we heard a gunshot. The noise seemed to startle the warden, his eyes becoming just eyes for a heartbeat before once again fading into endless shadows. "Too late," he said, more gunfire erupting out of sight. "I asked you for one simple thing. I asked you to bring me the traitors so that we could forget this whole sorry mess. I promised you leniency, mercy even." "Somebody do 'em!" said the skull, but nobody in the yard was moving. The sight of the warden looking so weak had us all hypnotised, like rabbits caught in the headlights. "I was willing to forgive your crimes, to let life go on without punishment," he he continued, wiping his hand across his face as the trickle of blood suddenly became a stream. "But you have chosen another path." I thought I heard another noise from the screen, the sound of metal striking rock. As it grew louder, however, I realised it was something falling down the elevator shaft. There was a ringing clang as it thudded onto the roof of the cab, gradually ebbing into silence. I glanced at Simon, who was moving warily away from the doors. Above him, looming over us like a giant, the warden peeled open his lips again. "You have made that choice," he said through his soulless smile. "It is too late to turn back. The time for forgiveness and redemption is over. Yes, you have made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Not that many of you, or any of you, will live past tonight." A groan of fear shuddered across the yard, echoing off the walls. At least I thought it was an echo, until the sound came again, that same grating roar that we'd heard before. It was closer now. A bestial snarl, punctuated only by the percussive clank of more metal falling onto the elevator roof. This time, everyone took a stumbling step back. "There is no way out of Furnace Penitentiary," the warden said, emphasising every word, "because I would seal you all die in here before you set foot outside of this prison. There will be more criminals to fill your cells, more children to take your place. Life will go on just as it did before, but you..." He paused, as if he too could hear the raw, wet screams that dropped down the elevator shaft. "Your time is now over." There was a series of deafening crunches high above our heads, causing the very walls of the prison to tremble and sending curtains of dust spiralling down from the shadows. The sound was like explosives being detonated, the bangs muffled by thick rock. But deep inside me I knew the source of the noise was something far worse than dynamite. No, whatever the warden was sending would have none of the mercy of fire. It was something big, something living, falling fast. I thought about the words I'd heard from the phone back in the warden's office, that impossible promise. "I am coming for you." The warden seemed to read my mind, and like so many times before, I felt his eyes boring into mine, dirty fingers in my brain. "Alfred Furnace sends his regards," he said, his eyes so dark, his lips curling back so much that his face became a skull. "Allow me to introduce you to the Berserkers." There was another bone-shattering crunch from the shaft, powerful enough to rip a ragged gash down the rock. The screen shattered, the warden's grin splintered into a million shards of glass that sliced across the yard. The elevator doors ballooned outwards as if they were made of rubber, a fountain of smoke and sparks concealing what lay beyond. But past the haze, through the gap in the doors, I caught a glimpse of something surely too large, too fast to be alive, thrashing, pounding, howling. Even though the screen had gone, the speakers must have remained, because the warden's voice called out to us like a phantom's. "May God have mercy on your souls," it said, "because I won't." With a deafening crunch, the yard went dark, the dull glow of the fire struggling to hold back the endless shadows. Then, with a burst of sparks, the bulbs of the Blood Watch came on, painting everything in thick red light. And over the sound of 1,000 panicked screams came the warden's insane, howling laughter. A chilling battle cry that damned us all. Oh, it's gonna get crazy. Okay, so tomorrow there's just a tiny little bit left. Next chapter is called Berserkers, obviously. Things are about to get very messy. probably one of my favourite few scenes to write coming up. I'm going to read it all tomorrow. We'll finish the book, and I'll probably have the weekend off, and then on Monday we'll start on Fugitives as well, because I'm loving this so much. Anyway, I hope you are too. I better go and check on my kids. Like I said, they're a bit feral. They might have like tied my wife up or something, and I don't know, maybe like graffitiing the walls. I don't know what else they might be doing, but it'll be mischief, whatever it is. So I better go downstairs. But anyway, really nice to see you all. I feel like you're all there. I feel like when I do this, I feel like you're all kind of, I know it's not live, but I feel like you're all kind of watching. And it's really nice. So really nice to see you all, and I will hopefully see you again tomorrow for the finale of Death Sentence. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.